The Battle of Solway Moss between English and Scottish forces took place on the 24th of November 1542 on the English side of the Anglo-Scottish border near the River Esk. This documentary looks at the battle and the reasons behind it. King James V of Scotland was urged by his uncle, King Henry VIII of England, to break from the Roman Catholic Church. James ignored Henry's request and refused to meet him at York, which Henry took as a great insult. And an angry Henry would send his army into an incursion into Scotland. In retaliation, James responded to the raid by the massive English army by giving a task to Robert, Lord Maxwell, the Scottish Warden of West March, to raise an army against the English. Lord Maxwell self-appointed himself as commander of the force and to lead the attack of the Scottish army of between 15,000 to 18,000 men on the 24th of November 1542. Oliver Sinclair, James V's favourite, also declared himself to be James' chosen commander. Many Scottish commanders refused to recognise Sinclair's command and the command structure collapsed. Both English commanders, Lord Wharton and Sir William Musgrave, both reported that Maxwell was in charge and fought with the rest of the Scottish nobles when they were forced to dismount from their horses on the bank of the River Esk. The Scottish army were confronted by an English army of 3,000 men, a fraction of the size of the Scottish forces at Solway Moss. The English forces, led by Sir Thomas Wharton, who described the battle as the overthrow of the Scots between the River Esk and Lyme. The Scottish forces were totally uncoordinated and the battle became a rout. The Scottish forces were penned in the south of the River Esk in English territory between the river and the Moss, which was then a peat bog, following the first English cavalry charge. Eventually they would surrender themselves and 10 of the field guns to the English cavalry after intense fighting. Hundreds of Scots were drowned in the marshes and the river as they became beguiled by their own guiding, as one Scottish commentator would put it. King James V would remain at Lochmaben during the battle, withdrawing to Falkland Palace after the defeat, humiliated and ill with fever. His will to live was finally crushed with the news that his wife and queen had given birth to a daughter instead of a son, and he is believed to have said, "The House of Stuart came with a lass and will go out with a lass." The last Stuart monarch would eventually be a woman, albeit with Queen Anne, who passed away in November 1714. James died 2 weeks after the battle at Falkland Palace at the age of 30. He would die lamenting the loss of his banner and the capture of Oliver Sinclair at Solway Moss more than any other of his losses. It is estimated that English losses at the battle totalled 7 men to the Scots' 20 men, and around 1,000 Scottish prisoners were taken. The Scottish prisoners were taken to London on the 14th of December 1542. Following Thomas Wharton's battle report to the Privy Council, the Scottish prisoners were ordered to wear a red St Andrew's cross when they entered London. Some of the Scottish earls, lords and lairds captured at the battle would send pledges and other word for hostages in their place. The English army also captured the Scottish royal arm with an imperial crown amongst other spoils of war. The Spanish ambassador, Eustace Chapwis, noted that on Christmas Day, the Scottish prisoners attended the court of Henry VIII, wearing swords and dirks. He also reported that many of the prisoners conversed with the French ambassador, whilst they were also presented with gold chains from Henry VIII. The Scottish prisoners were well treated during their stay in England, with the hope it would help the English cause when the hostages were returned to Scotland after their ransoms were paid. On the 10th of January 1543, a number of high-ranking hostages were exchanged for pledges at Carlisle Castle. A number of exchanges were prevented as Scottish government's view of the prisoners were as traitors who were being brainwashed by Henry VIII. Many of the prisoners stayed on the English side of the border at Berwick-on-Tweed, as the hostages' families had been arrested in Scotland and were unable to provide pledges. Henry's policies towards the Scots did not change despite taking so many Scottish nobles as prisoners at the time of transition in Scotland, with Mary Queen of Scots' birth and ascension to the Scottish throne leading to the Scottish Parliament to reject the Treaty of Greenwich in 1543. The treaty, signed in July 1543, proposed peace between the two nations and the marriage of Henry's son, Edward VI, to Mary Queen of Scots. The rejection would lead to 8 years of fighting to continue between Scotland and England, which would become commonly known as the Rough Wooing.